The night began like any other Cooper family dinner. Too polished, too rehearsed, and too heavy with words left unsaid. The chandelier above the long oak table shimmered in soft amber, casting halos over crystal glasses filled with aged Merlot. Laughter floated through the air, brittle and hollow. My father, Derek Cooper, sat at the head as always, back straight, cufflinks glinting with authority. On his left sat my mother, Vivian, in a pearl gray gown, pretending her smile didn't tremble. Across from me, my older brother Ethan leaned back in his chair, the family's golden son, the heir to everything Redmont Energy stood for. Me, I was there to complete the picture, the forgotten frame in a perfect portrait. The sound of glass chiming interrupted my thoughts. Derek raised his glass, voice deep and controlled. To family, to legacy, to the Cooper name that never falters. Everyone lifted their glasses. Everyone except me. I hesitated, my eyes drifting to Ethan, his smile too wide, too forced. There was a flicker in his gaze, something cold, calculating. As the toast ended, Ethan leaned closer, his tone low and almost playful. You should drink, little brother. It's not every day Dad gives a speech about you staying loyal. I smiled faintly, though my stomach tightened. Loyalty's earned, not bought, remember? He chuckled softly, but his eyes didn't match the sound. That's the thing about Ethan. His words always came dipped in sugar but sharpened underneath. Dinner ended with the usual formalities. The staff cleared the plates. Laughter turned into murmurs, and my father disappeared into his study, leaving the rest of us in the dining hall's fading warmth. I excused myself, saying I had an early morning flight back to Atlanta, but as I reached for my coat near the door, I noticed it. A quick motion in the reflection of the hallway mirror. Ethan, standing behind me, too close. His hand brushed my backpack, just a fraction of a second, before he gave me that same charming smile. Forgot to give you the project files for next week. Thought you might want them for review. I zipped the bag shut, nodding casually. Thanks. But as I walked toward my car, the sound of his words echoed oddly in my mind. Project files? Ethan never trusted me with company documents, let alone took the time to hand me anything himself. The night air outside was sharp, the kind that carries silence like a weight. I tossed the backpack onto the passenger seat and sat there for a moment, staring through the windshield at the mansion's glowing windows. Every instinct in me screamed something was wrong. I unzipped the bag slowly. Inside, beneath my laptop and a few papers, something unfamiliar glinted under the dashboard light. A small black pouch, sealed tight. It wasn't heavy, but it felt dangerous. I didn't touch it, not yet. I just stared at it, pulse steady, mind racing. Inside that pouch was the reason Ethan had smiled. The reason he'd wanted me to drink that toast. The reason my father had chosen tonight of all nights to speak about loyalty. Every instinct in me screamed something was wrong. I unzipped the bag slowly. Inside, beneath my laptop and a few papers, something unfamiliar glinted under the dashboard light. A small black pouch, sealed tight. It wasn't heavy, but it felt dangerous. I didn't touch it, not yet. I just stared at it, pulse steady, mind racing. Inside that pouch was the reason Ethan had smiled. The reason he'd wanted me to drink that toast. The reason my father had chosen tonight of all nights to speak about loyalty. I reached for my phone, but stopped. If I called anyone now, I'd only confirm what Ethan wanted them to believe. So instead, I leaned back, exhaled slowly, and whispered into the darkness. You should have picked someone else to play with, brother. The Cooper mansion loomed behind me like a cathedral of secrets. The black pouch sat quietly in my lap, and somewhere deep inside, I felt the shift, the first tremor of a plan forming. Because whatever Ethan had planted in my bag, I was going to plant something far worse back into his. The drive back to my apartment that night was silent. Too silent, the kind that made every thought echo louder than it should. The city lights blurred through my windshield, painting streaks of gold across the glass, but all I could see was that black pouch sitting on the seat beside me. I parked outside my building and sat still for a long time, the car engine ticking softly as it cooled. My reflection stared back from the dark window, calm on the outside. But inside, my pulse beat like a quiet alarm. I finally reached for the pouch. It was made of fine leather, expensive, deliberate. Someone wanted this to look important. My fingers hesitated at the zipper. When I opened it, a thin stack of papers slid out, wrapped neatly with a rubber band. Beneath it, a flash drive. No label, no markings, just a small piece of plastic that could burn down a life. I flipped through the papers slowly. Financial records, company transactions, offshore accounts, Redmont Energy, the family business. But these weren't normal numbers. The entries were doctored, trails erased, funds rerouted. It looked like embezzlement. And the initials NC were scribbled at the bottom of every page. My initials. A cold calm settled over me. Ethan wasn't just setting me up. He'd built this carefully. This was weeks, maybe months in the making. The plan was simple. Make me look like the weak link, the brother who'd stolen from the company. Then, when the audit hit next week, Derek would have no choice but to cut me loose. Not just from Redmont, from the family. I sat back, staring at the flash drive in my hand. One wrong move and my name would be destroyed. But Ethan had made a mistake. He underestimated what silence can do when it starts thinking. I didn't call the police. I didn't call my father. I didn't even confront Ethan. Instead, I spent the next day at work like nothing had happened. Calm, polite, invisible. But that night, I went back to Hollowbrook Heights. The mansion was quiet. The kind of stillness that only money can buy. Thick and soundproof. I let myself in through the side gate, the same one the gardeners used. My old key still worked. Inside, the lights were low. The smell of expensive cologne and fresh flowers lingered in the air. I moved carefully down the hallway, each creak of the floorboards echoing like a whisper of memory. Ethan's office was on the second floor, right next to our father's study. I knew the layout better than he thought I did. He used to brag about the room's soundproof design, where he took his private meetings. Smiled at the irony as I slipped the pouch from my pocket. I wasn't here to take anything. I was here to return something. The desk drawer wasn't even locked. Arrogance always forgets the small details. I slid the pouch inside, tucking it under a pile of contracts. Then I added one more thing, a small silver pen drive with a red sticker. Inside it, the same files. But this time they told the truth. Ethan wasn't covering for me. He was covering for himself. The offshore accounts were his. The embezzlement led straight to his name. I'd spent the last 24 hours tracing every transfer he'd tried to bury, rebuilding the digital trail he thought was gone. Now all I had to do was wait. As I stood in the dim glow of the office lamp, I caught my reflection in the glass cabinet, calm, steady, unreadable. I whispered, "You wanted a show, Ethan, let's give them one." I turned off the lights and slipped out, the house swallowing my footsteps. Outside, the night wind brushed against my face. Somewhere inside that mansion, my brother slept soundly, dreaming of my downfall. He had no idea that when the truth surfaced, the same darkness he tried to drown me in would come for him first. Morning sunlight spilled across my desk in the accounting department of Redmont Energy, catching the edge of a coffee cup that had long gone cold. The day had begun like any other. Polite greetings, quiet keystrokes, the distant hum of air conditioning. But beneath the calm, something electric was coming. The audit. Redmont had scheduled its quarterly review weeks ago, but everyone knew this one would be different. The whispers had started late last night that inconsistencies had been found in the ledgers, that the board was concerned, that the chairman, my father, wanted answers. And when Derek Cooper wanted answers, people lost their careers. I sat quietly at my workstation, eyes on my computer screen, pretending to check numbers. Around me, employees moved like nervous shadows. Then, through the glass wall of the boardroom, I saw him, Ethan, tailored suit, crisp tie, the picture of control. He stood beside our father, voice smooth and confident, shaking hands with the external auditors as they entered. From the outside, it looked like he was helping inside. He was making sure the knife pointed in my direction. My phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. "Board meeting in 10. Dad wants you there. Bring your laptop." I typed back nothing. I just closed my computer, straightened my tie, and looked once more at my reflection in the screen. Calm, controlled, invisible. The boardroom smelled faintly of cedar and power, a mix that never suited me. Derek sat at the head of the long glass table, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Vivian, my mother, avoided my gaze, her fingers twisting the diamond ring on her hand. Ethan stood to my left, already speaking as I entered. "I've already gone through some of the files. Dad, there's a particular set of discrepancies linked to Noah's department. I thought it was best to let the auditors see them directly." He turned slightly, eyes meeting mine, polite, brotherly, poisonous. The lead auditor, a stern woman named Ms. Alvarez, adjusted her glasses. "Mr. Cooper, if you don't mind, could you share your financial logs for the last quarter?" I nodded. placed my laptop on the table and opened the files. My fingers didn't shake. They didn't need to. Ethan leaned forward, too eager, watching every move. My father's gaze never left my face. Ms. Alvarez connected her flash drive, the company's standard audit device, and began transferring data. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the computer. Then after a long minute, she frowned. "That's strange." Ethan's tone was careful, rehearsed. "What seems to be the issue?" She turned her screen toward him. "The records show multiple unauthorized transfers under your department's authorization code." Ethan's smile faltered. I think you're mistaken. "Those were under Noah's—" Ms. Alvarez interrupted. "No, the trail leads to your personal clearance, Mr. Ethan Cooper. The same code used for offshore transfers to Averon Holdings and—" She paused, glancing at the file. "And an account registered under your name." For a heartbeat, the air froze. Derek's expression hardened. "Ethan, what is this?" I sat perfectly still. Not a word, not a blink. Ethan stammered something, words about system errors, shared devices, confusion in the logging software. But the calm rhythm of his excuses broke apart the longer he spoke. The auditors listened, cold and methodical. Then my father's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Enough." Silence. He turned to me, his tone low. "Noah, did you know about this?" I met his gaze evenly. "I suspected something, sir. That's why I left the files for review." The truth hit the room like thunder. Ethan's head snapped toward me, disbelief and fury flickering in his eyes. He knew I'd set the stage. He just didn't know how completely. The audit continued for another hour. Every piece of evidence unraveled Ethan's story further. The forged initials, the fake timestamps, the hidden accounts. All roads led back to him. When it was over, Derek rose slowly, his voice controlled but shaking with something deeper than anger. Ethan stammered something, words about system errors, shared devices, confusion in the logging software. But the calm rhythm of his excuses broke apart the longer he spoke. The auditors listened, cold and methodical. Then my father's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Enough." Silence. He turned to me, his tone low. "Noah, did you know about this?" I met his gaze evenly. "I suspected something, sir. That's why I left the files for review." The truth hit the room like thunder. Ethan's head snapped toward me, disbelief and fury flickering in his eyes. He knew I'd set the stage. He just didn't know how completely. The audit continued for another hour. Every piece of evidence unraveled Ethan's story further. The forged initials, the fake timestamps, the hidden accounts. All roads led back to him. When it was over, Derek rose slowly, his voice controlled but shaking with something deeper than anger. "You've brought shame to this family, Ethan." Ethan didn't respond. His jaw clenched, eyes burning into mine. I looked at him once quietly. "You should have checked your drawer before you came to work." That was the moment it hit him. The black pouch, the flash drive, the files he thought he'd planted on me. The color drained from his face. Derek ordered security to escort him out of the building while the auditors collected the evidence. My mother turned her face away, one trembling hand against her lips. When Ethan passed me, he whispered, barely audible, "You think you've won?" I didn't answer, because I wasn't done yet. The Cooper mansion had always looked strongest at night, all marble and silence, lit from within like a cathedral of money. But tonight it looked fragile. Too many lights on, too many shadows moving behind the curtains. When I pulled into the driveway, 2 black cars I didn't recognize were parked outside. Lawyers, maybe. Damage control. I stepped through the front doors and felt it. Immediately, the tension, hanging in the air like a fog that couldn't escape. The staff moved quickly, eyes lowered. My mother's voice carried faintly from the parlor, brittle but composed. "Derek, we can't let this reach the press. Not now. Not after the new partnership deal." Then his reply, low and sharp. "It's already out. Someone leaked it." I walked in before they could finish. My father stood near the fireplace, phone in hand, face lit by its screen. My mother sat on the edge of the sofa, clutching her pearls like they were the only thing keeping her together. They both turned when I entered. For a moment, silence. Then Derek said, "You shouldn't have come back here." "It's still my home," I said evenly. "Isn't it?" He looked at me, not angry, just tired. The kind of tired that comes from realizing the walls you built to keep out the world can't keep out your own blood. "Ethan's at the firm," he said quietly. "He's refusing to speak to anyone." The board's suspended his access, and the auditors are demanding a full review. Do you have any idea what this means for us? I stepped closer, voice calm. It means the truth is finally in the open. Vivian rose slowly, her voice trembling. Noah, you don't understand. The Coopers have survived every scandal by staying united. What you did, what you revealed, you've torn that unity apart. I met her gaze steady. No, Mom, I just stopped pretending it existed. She flinched at that, looking away. Derek's eyes narrowed, measuring me the way he used to measure contracts, coldly, carefully. You could have handled this quietly, he said. Ethan could have been corrected. Now the company's reputation is bleeding. He was stealing, Dad. He's still my son. So am I. The words hung in the air like smoke. For the first time in years, my father didn't have an answer. He turned away, staring into the fire, jaw tight. Go back to Atlanta, Noah. Let me clean up what's left. I should have walked out. I should have left it there. But something inside me, that same quiet instinct that had saved me, refused. He didn't just do this because of money, did he? Derek froze. There's more to it, I continued softly. He wasn't trying to destroy Redmont. He was trying to destroy me. Why? Vivian's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes darting between us. Derek's silence said everything. What did you hide, Dad? I asked. He turned, finally meeting my eyes. You were never supposed to be part of this company. You weren't supposed to have a stake. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? Your mother and I made a decision years ago, he said. The shares, the inheritance, it all went to Ethan. You were given a salary, not ownership. It was meant to keep things simple. Simple, I repeated quietly, meaning controllable. He didn't deny it. Vivian whispered. Ethan found out last month that you discovered the clause in your contract. That's why he... Her voice broke. That was it, the motive. Ethan hadn't framed me just for power. He'd done it out of fear. Fear that I'd take back what was legally mine but never meant to be given. I nodded slowly. Thank you for confirming it. Derek's voice hardened again. Don't twist this into revenge. You'll only make things worse. I turned toward the door. Worse? No, Father. I'm just getting started. His voice followed me down the hallway, deep and weary. You think this is justice? Noah. But you're playing with a family that doesn't lose. I stopped at the door, my hand on the handle, and looked back once. Maybe, but you taught me numbers don't lie. And neither does blood. The front door closed behind me with a soft click. Outside, the night smelled of rain, the kind that comes before something breaks. I got into my car, opened my laptop, and stared at the files still open on the screen. There was one name I hadn't checked yet, a shadow account that didn't belong to Ethan or Derek. Someone else was pulling strings, and the more I stared, the clearer it became. The trail didn't end with Ethan. It began with him. Rain came down in thin, steady lines across my windshield, tracing shapes against the glass like invisible handwriting, the kind of night where the city felt quieter than it should, as if it knew something was about to break. The glow of my laptop screen painted the inside of my car a cold, sterile blue. The file I'd opened sat like a wound that wouldn't close. A shadow account, untraceable at first, then a small, careless detail, a timestamp that matched a transaction from years ago, back when I was still in university. Someone had been laundering funds long before Ethan ever had access. The last signature wasn't his. It wasn't my father's either. It was Vivian, my mother. For a moment, I thought it had to be a mistake. She'd always seemed more frightened than powerful. A woman trapped in her own reflection, too delicate to get her hands dirty. But the data didn't lie. Every number lined up perfectly. Every account had her name buried in its code history. And every cover-up Ethan had done, every doctored file, had been to hide her tracks. My breath fogged the glass. The truth sat heavy, cruel, and strangely inevitable. Ethan hadn't tried to frame me just for the company. He'd done it to protect her, and she'd let him. I closed the laptop, hands trembling, not from fear, but from the strange calm that comes when betrayal stops being surprising. The next morning, I went back to the mansion. The storm had passed, leaving the air clean but the ground wet, like even the earth was trying to wash something away. Inside, the house was quiet again, almost too quiet. My father was gone, probably meeting with the lawyers, but from down the hallway I could hear soft music playing from the parlor. My mother's music. I found her sitting on the sofa, dressed in ivory silk, a cup of tea untouched beside her. Her hands were still, folded neatly on her lap. She didn't seem surprised to see me. "You shouldn't be here, Noah." "And yet," I said, stepping closer, "you knew I would be." Her eyes flicked up to mine, calm, controlled, like a mask she'd worn for decades. "You found it, didn't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She sighed softly, a fragile sound. "I always knew you'd see through the numbers faster than anyone. You have your father's eyes, but not his blindness." "How long?" I asked quietly. "Long enough," she said. "Long before you were meant to notice." I stared at her, waiting for something, an apology, a reason, even a lie. But she just looked past me, her gaze distant. "It started when Redmond expanded overseas," she continued. "Your father made enemies. He couldn't move funds without scrutiny. So I did what he couldn't. I moved them through accounts no one would ever question. My name meant nothing on paper. I was invisible." "Invisible," I repeated. "That's what you call it." She tilted her head faintly. "You think this family runs on honesty? Your father built an empire on illusion. I just learned to play the same game." "And Ethan?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "He found out last year. I told him to stay quiet. But when he realized you were looking into the ledgers, he panicked. He thought you'd expose me, so he did what he thought would save us both. By destroying me," I said flatly. Her silence was the only answer I needed. "You let him do it," I said. "You let him put that evidence in my bag." A flicker of guilt crossed her face, faint, almost graceful. "It wasn't supposed to go that far." I laughed once quietly. "You always say that when the fire's already burning." For the first time, her composure cracked. Her voice trembled, softer now. "You think I don't live with the guilt, Noah? Every morning I wake up and see what this family has become, but you don't understand what power does to people. You can't just step away. It follows you. Then maybe it's time someone stops running." I placed a small envelope on the coffee table, plain white, unmarked. She stared at it like it was alive. "What's this?" "A copy of the full transfer history," I said. "Including your signatures. I'm not handing it to the press. Not yet." Her voice turned sharp again. "Not yet?" "That depends," I said. "On whether you tell Dad the truth yourself." She shook her head slowly, tears glinting in her eyes. "You think he'd forgive me? He built this house on control. I'd be nothing to him." "Then you already are," I said quietly. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint ticking of the antique clock on the wall. When I turned to leave, her voice broke through the silence, small, desperate. "Noah, what are you going to do?" I stopped at the doorway, glancing back. "I'm going to finish what Ethan started. But this time the truth won't destroy me. It'll set me free." Her eyes widened, a flash of fear behind the calm. "You don't know what your father is capable of." "I think I'm starting to," I said. And then I left, her reflection in the glass door fading behind me like a ghost in daylight. Outside, the clouds began to gather again, and my phone buzzed with a new message. Unknown number. No text, just a photo. It was my apartment. The door wide open. Drawers overturned. And at the bottom of the image, a single line of text. "You should have stayed quiet, Noah." I froze, the rain starting again, soft but cold against my face. Someone else was in the game now, and they knew exactly where I lived. The drive back to Atlanta was a blur of highway lights and rain. My phone sat on the dashboard, screen dark, but that last message burned in my mind like a brand. "You should have stayed quiet, Noah." Whoever sent it wasn't Ethan. He wouldn't be that subtle. He'd be loud, dramatic, careless. This was precision, someone who already knew every move before I made it. By the time I reached my apartment, dawn was just beginning to bleed into the sky. Gray, tired light over the city. The hallway outside my door smelled faintly of damp carpet and metal, but underneath it was something else. Cold air. The kind that only comes from a door left ajar. I pushed it open slowly. The lock was shattered. Inside, the place looked like it had been turned inside out. Drawers dumped, shelves emptied. The faint crunch of glass under my shoes as I stepped inside. Every file, every paper, every trace of my quiet life, scattered. But it wasn't random. They hadn't taken the TV or the laptop or the safe. Whoever had been here knew exactly what to look for. And then I saw it, on the kitchen counter, under the faint morning light. A small black pouch, the same kind Ethan had planted weeks ago. Only this time it wasn't mine. I picked it up carefully. It was lighter than before, but there was something inside. A folded note. I opened it, the handwriting sharp, deliberate. You think you've uncovered everything, but you haven't looked at the last file. Underneath the note, a flash drive. Unmarked. Familiar. For a long moment, I just stared at it. My heart steady, but my hands cold. Whoever had broken in hadn't come to steal. They'd come to warn. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. One folder, one file. Redmont Internal 2020. Inside, dozens of scanned contracts, old correspondence, and something else. A letter, signed by Derek Cooper. It was addressed to the Redmont board, dated 5 years ago. Subject line, ownership revision and contingency. I began to read. Effective immediately. Should any Cooper family member be found engaging in fraudulent or criminal activity that could compromise Redmont's reputation, all legal ownership rights and assets, under the Cooper name, shall transfer to the remaining unaffected heir, per clause 14a, and below that, a name, handwritten in ink, Noah Cooper, my name. For a second, the room tilted. I scrolled further. Attached was a second letter, unsigned, but the header said it all. Draft, for internal hold. If clause 14a is triggered, initiate immediate reassignment to Ethan Cooper. Remove subject Noah Cooper from consideration. So that was it. Ethan had tried to destroy me not just to save himself, but because he'd found out I was the true heir. My father had written that clause years ago quietly, probably as insurance against Ethan's recklessness. But at some point he'd changed his mind, or been convinced to. The draft meant someone inside Redmont had altered the line of inheritance, rewriting the company's bloodline. I stared at the screen, the truth hitting harder with each word. The break-in wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. Someone wanted me to use what I just found. But who? The door creaked behind me. I spun, every muscle tight. But the figure standing in the doorway wasn't a stranger. It was Vivian. Her eyes were red, her coat drenched from the rain, her voice trembling when she spoke. I tried to stop them, Noah. I told your father not to sign the draft. But Ethan, he made sure it got to the lawyers. He had leverage on him. He knew about the accounts. I stared at her. You came here to tell me that now? After everything. She stepped closer, her voice low, desperate. They're going to erase you completely. Your name, your position, your access, everything. Derek's holding an emergency meeting this morning to finalize the transfer. Once he signs it, you'll be nothing. I looked at the file still glowing on my laptop screen. Unless I sign first. Her eyes widened. What are you saying? There's a legal timestamp embedded in the clause, I said. If I submit the original version before they finalize the draft, it overrides any later revision. It becomes permanent. Vivian's voice broke. Noah, you can't fight them like this. Your father will destroy you. I looked up at her, calm, certain. He already tried. I packed the laptop into my bag, zipped it shut, and stepped past her. Noah, please. You wanted me invisible, Mom. Now it's your turn to watch. Her tears fell silently as I walked out the door. Outside, the rain had stopped, but thunder still rolled in the distance. Slow, heavy, final. In 3 hours, the Cooper board would meet at Redmont headquarters. In 3 hours, I'd walk in with the one file that could end them all. The elevator ride to the top floor of Redmont. Headquarters felt longer than usual. The metallic hum, the faint reflection of my face in the glass walls, the storm clouds still pressing against the skyline outside. My reflection looked calm, too calm. But inside something had shifted. When the doors opened, the air smelled faintly of polished wood and money, the kind of silence only powerful people knew how to command. At the end of the hall, through frosted glass doors, I could already hear the murmur of voices, deep, steady, impatient. My father's tone cut through the rest, cold and absolute. I straightened my coat, adjusted the strap of my bag, and walked in. 12 heads turned. At the far end of the long mahogany table sat Derek Cooper, gray suit crisp, eyes sharp, with Ethan seated just beside him, confident, leaning back like someone who already owned the room. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my father broke the silence. You weren't invited to this meeting. Noah, you never invite problems, Dad, I said quietly. They just arrive. A ripple went through the room. My brother's smirk twitched, half amusement, half warning. If you're here to make a scene, Derek said, tapping his pen, make it quick. We have a lot to finalize today. I'm not here to make a scene, I said, placing my laptop on the table. I'm here to make it official. Ethan leaned forward, his voice like silk. You're out of your depth. Noah, the board's already agreed. The transfer's been approved. You don't even work here anymore. I looked at him, at that same smug confidence he'd worn his entire life. Always one step ahead, always shielded by the Cooper name. Maybe, I said softly. But it's funny what happens when the truth comes out before the ink dries. With a few keystrokes, I projected the document onto the large screen behind me. The board leaned in, eyes narrowing as the company's internal clause appeared. Highlighted and dated, Clause 14A, Ownership Transfer Contingency. Original signatory, Derek Cooper. Beneficiary, Noah Cooper. The room went still. Ethan's smirk faltered. My father's face hardened. Where did you get that? He asked, his voice low. From the company archives, I said. And from the lawyer who drafted it. Turns out someone tried to replace this version with a newer one. An unsigned one. I looked at Ethan. Someone who thought they could rewrite family bloodlines with a few keystrokes. Ethan slammed his hand on the table. You have no proof that I... Actually, I do. The next file appeared, a scan of an internal email chain between Ethan and a private IT consultant. Subject Clause 14A revision, urgent. Attached, the draft version naming Ethan Cooper as sole heir. A gasp went around the room. That's fabricated. Ethan snapped, voice cracking slightly. I didn't respond. I simply played the next attachment, a security clip. It showed Ethan in Redmont's internal archives late one night, entering under his father's access card, leaving with a flash drive. My father's hand slowly lowered from the table. His expression, unreadable. Ethan turned to him, panic rising. Dad, I did it for us. You said, enough. Derek's voice cut through the room like glass. He stood looking down at his elder son, the one he'd spent years grooming, defending, believing in. For the first time, there was no authority in his tone, just disbelief. You lied to me. You risked everything. For you, Ethan shouted. For this family. He doesn't belong here. He never did. The room went silent again. I stepped closer, my voice calm. That's what you never understood, Ethan. This was never about belonging. It was about integrity. You thought I was quiet because I was weak, but I was quiet because I was watching. He glared at me, desperate, cornered. You think they'll trust you after this? They don't have to, I said. The documents do. The board chair cleared his throat, his tone professional but tense. Given this revelation, the clause stands as originally signed. Ownership and controlling interest revert to Noah Cooper. Ethan froze. Derek didn't look at anyone, just at the wall, or maybe past it. The reality of what he'd built, what he'd lost, settling over him like dust. When he finally spoke, his voice was a whisper. Get out! Ethan hesitated. Dad, get out, he repeated louder. Security entered quietly. Ethan's eyes burned with betrayal as he was led out, his voice fading down the hallway. The board members began murmuring, packing their files, already moving on, the way business people always do when a chapter closes. I stood there a moment longer, staring at the empty chair beside my father. He finally looked up at me. You think you've won, don't you? No, I said softly. I just stopped losing. He didn't answer, just turned his gaze toward the window, the city lights reflecting in his eyes. For the first time, he looked old. I closed my laptop and walked out. Outside, the storm had passed. The streets of downtown Atlanta glistened under the first clean light of morning. I stepped into it, free for the first time in years. As I walked away, my phone buzzed. An unknown number? You did well, but you still haven't found who wrote the draft. I stopped. The wind cut sharp against my coat. I typed a reply. Who are you? 3 dots blinked. You'll know soon. Vivian. The message disappeared instantly after sending. For a long moment, I just stood there. The world suddenly bigger than it had ever been. I'd won the war. But maybe, just maybe, it hadn't ended yet.